Hi, my name is Ashley and I'm a mom of 2 little girls. I have a 3-year-old named Kylie and I also have a 13-month-old named Mia. Although the Montessori approach has been around for over 100 years, it is becoming increasingly popular at home with parents of young children. And while there is a lot of great information out there on how to implement Montessori at home with your children, unfortunately there's also a lot of misinformation. And for a parent who is totally new to this, it might be a little bit difficult to decipher between what is correct implementation of a Montessori philosophy and what is not. That's not to say that there is one particular way to do Montessori properly at home, because every family has its own unique interpretation and spin on things that works for their family. But across the board, there are some basic tenets that you would want to make sure that you are following as closely as you possibly can so that your child is receiving the maximum possible benefit from implementing Montessori at home with them. One very big misconception about Montessori is that it's about the stuff, about all of the toys and activities. And honestly, that could not be further from the truth. At its heart, Montessori is about the child, and what's most important is setting them up for success so that they can be happy, confident, self-sufficient little people from as early as they are ready to be. It's about your relationship with your child and showing them true respect so that they internalize what respect looks like when it comes to respect for themselves, others, and the environment. However, that all aside, I want to help you take a closer look at one of the areas in a Montessori home that tends to be a main focal point for parents, and that is your child's activity shelves. So from one busy parent to another, today I'd like to share with you some tips and ideas on how to set up your child's Montessori activity shelves properly. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you are aiming for a minimal quantity of toys and activities at any given time. And the rest of the things that your child owns need to be stored away for later rotation, which we will talk about more in just a minute, so hang with me. So keeping in mind that less is more, you also want to make sure that you have enough space between the activities as they are presented on the shelves to your child. Now, if you happen to have just plain low shelving with no dividers or anything, then just make sure that there's at least a couple of inches between each of the activities. Not that you're shoving all of them together and cramming them in such a way that it's kind of confusing when you look at it. Everything on the shelf should have a clearly delineated space where it's very obvious that that is where it goes. If you are using one of the very popular cubby shelf systems that has either 4 or 8 cubbies in it, you would want to make sure in that case that you only have one toy or activity per cubby. If you're shoving 2 and 3 toys into each cubby, it's too much. Your goal here is to beautifully display each of the items so that it's attractive and that it calls to your child and they want to go over and engage with that activity. So if you're cluttering the visual space by putting too many things in one small space, your child is going to be much less apt to want to go over there and investigate what's on the shelf. And also make sure that whatever shelving system you use, it is low enough for your child to access all of the things that you do have out for them to use at any given time. And that also goes for the tops of some of these shelving systems, especially for young children. Even if you do display activities up there and it looks very nice from an adult point of view, you really need to get down almost on your hands and knees and look from their point of view. If they can't see the activities that are up there, even if they can reach them, if they can't see them, then your child won't really pay attention to the fact that they're there and they're not going to get used. And if you're looking for a guideline as to how many activities to display at any given time, I would say for infants and toddlers, anywhere between 8 to 10 activities at a time is a good number to aim for. Of course, there is always flexibility, so if you need to have a few more activities than that, there is nothing wrong with that, as long as you are making sure that you're displaying it in an organized fashion and that things aren't beginning to look too cluttered. And the reason behind things being set up this way is because the calm simplicity and the beauty of a minimalistic space really calls to a child's internal sense of order. It might be hard to believe if you are new to this because children are often portrayed as messy little creatures who don't really care about things like that, but children go through an entire sensitive period dedicated to order when they are very young. So having this environment set up in a way that they can find everything it is that they're looking for and they can access the materials independently, it really truly helps them on their journey of development. It also leads to better engagement of your child with the toys that you do have out and available for them, and it allows them to concentrate better on the things that they are working on because they don't have all of this excess visual clutter crowding out their mind and their thought processes. And a bonus for you as the parent, but also for your child, is that cleaning up independently is a lot easier because they know where each of the activities goes on the shelf because everything has a place. They know that all the pieces go back into the basket or tray that it came from. Once they are walking, they can actually learn to put the activities away all by themselves, and eventually it does become second nature to them. Oftentimes children are very resistant to cleaning up just because there is so much to clean up that it visually looks very overwhelming to them and they immediately shut down. So making sure that the toys and activities that you have out are minimal and very organized is going to be beneficial for everyone. My next tip is to consider offering your child variety in the types of toys and activities that you make available. Now I know that might come off at first as kind of a no-brainer, very silly tip to offer, but really sometimes it's easy to overlook exactly what it is that your child is engaging with every day and not really putting much thought into it. You're just kind of haphazardly giving them things that maybe were received as a gift from someone else or something they saw at the store, and because they're interested in it, you know, great, let's put it out. But you might find it actually helpful and more engaging for your child to put a little bit of forethought into what different types of activities you might be able to offer to cater to a different range of skills. Now again, there are no hard and fast rules on what types of activities to offer because it really is dependent on your child's age and their interests and their developmental needs. But as a starting point for some ideas, I would like to share with you what my current setup is in the girls' playroom and give you a little peek into what the different types of activities are that they're engaging with.
So this is what the entire playroom looks like right now, with Kylie at 3 years old and Mia at 13 months old. Behind me over here is their little art area. So in my current system in the cubbies for Kylie specifically, because Mia's shelf is a little bit more freeform right now depending on what skill she's working on, I do have a little bit of a system in each of the different cubbies. This one is all for hand-eye coordination, cognitive activities. This one is open-ended activities. This one is for anything science and culture related. This one is for sensorial activities. And then we have practical life, music, language, and math. So giving you guys a little bit of a closer look over here for hand-eye coordination right now, we have a set of 4 Melissa and Doug jigsaw puzzles. For a younger child, because there are 4 of them in here, I would probably only set out 1 of them in a basket. However, Kylie loves to do all 4 of the puzzles whenever she takes this out at a time. So I always leave all 4 of them in here for her. Right now for open-ended toys, she has a wooden train set. For science and culture, she's got her latest KiwiCo activity, and I will leave a link to KiwiCo down below if you've never seen this before. But this month's KiwiCo activity happened to be space related, so I was like, oh, this is perfect. So it's a little discovery box that's got different shapes that match the ones that are on the side, on the inside for her to grab. So it's almost like a mystery bag box, I guess, if you will, but it is science focused and it works on science vocabulary and concepts. So that's what we have for science right now. And right now in the sensorial cubby, we have a set of Montessori knobbed cylinders, which helps a child to visually discriminate by size. Moving down to the practical life cubby, this is where you might be able to set up like different pouring activities, things that would be safe and not too messy to have on a shelf at any given time. But right now, Kylie has shown a great interest in learning how the different closures on some of her clothing items work, especially zippers, snaps, and also buttons, which I had to take out this morning because one of the buttons actually came off, so I need to sew it back on. But I have 3 different dressing frames right now for her to work on. In the music cubby right now, we've got a little tambourine hand drum, a set of maracas, and a set of cymbals. We do have other instruments that I am starting to rotate out more regularly so that there's a different variety of instruments in here from time to time, and I only rotate them as I see the girls losing interest in one particular item. This basket right here is the language basket. We just have some animal figurines. Some of them are Schleich, some of them are Safari LTD, but they're all wild animals. We have different categories of animals available, and I'm trying to switch them out regularly now so that it's different categories instead of all of them in one basket. And yes, I know that wild animals do not live in a barn, but the girls like to have like a little house to put the animals in when they're playing with them. So even though they're wild animals, the barn always stays here, at least in the current setup that we have. If I do happen to put a different type of language activity in here that either doesn't involve the figurines, or if it involves something like matching, which I'm gonna be doing a series on pretty soon, so stay tuned, then that would come out and it would just be the figurines and the cards. And in the math cubby over here, this is something that actually stays out pretty regularly, because up until now, we really weren't focusing on math per se a whole lot, because both my girls are really young, but magnetiles are one of Kylie's favorite activities, and they do happen to teach math concepts. So they're learning early geometry and spatial reasoning skills by putting different 3 objects and structures together. So magnetiles are a perennial favorite, and also conveniently helps to reinforce early math skills. In the future, I will be starting to introduce more math activities to Kylie, so this cubby might actually rotate, but it will depend on what her interests are. Up here, this is not exactly a cubby, but I have a couple of sandpaper letters that Kylie and I are working on each week, and I do change them out as Kylie masters the different letters, so she's got something new to work on, and I like to keep them up out of Mia's reach so that they don't get ruined. So again, there are no hard and fast rules for how to organize this. This is just a system that I came up with, kind of modeling it after a Montessori classroom where you would have different areas for each of the subjects that the children are studying. So it's something that you could use if it works for you, but if it doesn't, that's okay. I also want to note that if your child happened to be more interested at any one given time, say for example on science and culture or language activities, then it's not unreasonable to say that perhaps you have 2 language cubbies instead of math, especially if your child is very young and they're not really into learning math concepts yet. So again, not a hard and fast rule, but just an idea for you. This little shelf over here, while not originally intended to be for Mia, has kind of turned into Mia's shelf because it is lower, so she's able to access the things that are on it a little bit more easily. And right now at 13 months old, these are some of the things that we have on her shelf. She has a mini Grimm's Rainbow Stacker, a set of bean bags, a set of sensory shakers, which recently she has taken to liking to stack on top of each other as well after seeing her sister do it. Down here is an infant coin box, which if you've never seen one before, it's literally exactly what it sounds like. You just take a coin, put it in, she opens the drawer to pull it back out again. And because it's in a tray presented this way, she has to learn how to take the tray neatly off of the shelf and bring it down here and remove the pieces from the tray in order to use it. And that is a skill that she's working on. So that's why I have this one placed a little bit lower down, so that even if she does happen to pull the whole thing down, it doesn't break. Right here we have her Familiar Faces basket, which is just a set of laminated pictures and labels of everyone in her family. We like to look at these basically every single day, and as she pulls them out and looks at them, I name them for her. As she does get older, we'll be able to play different types of games with them, but for now, they're just for exploration. Right here on the floor, we have a Melissa and Doug rainbow stacker, which is for hand-eye coordination, so she has to learn how to put the donuts on and then top it at the end with the little ball. And over here, this is a little DIY activity that I set up for her, which is just pom-pom posting. So I took an old Puffs container, popped a hole in the top of the lid here, and then she puts the little pom-poms in, and then once it's filled, I help her take the lid off to dump it out and start all over again. My next tip for you is to display your child's toys and activities in baskets or trays whenever possible. Now, there are some toys and activities that do not require a basket or a tray, and that's totally fine to just place it on the shelf as is. However, if there is an activity that has multiple parts or lots of small pieces, you most certainly are going to want to make sure that it is contained in some type of a basket or a tray or a combination thereof. This way, it's a lot more organized for your child and they can find all of the pieces that they need. And although it is not necessary per se, having handles on the baskets and trays is incredibly helpful, especially for small children who are first learning how to transport a tray from the shelf to wherever it is that they're going to be working with the activity. It's just a lot easier for them to carry it as opposed to trying to hold it and balance it and potentially spill things in the process. And as we've already mentioned, containing all the pieces of the activity in one tray will not only ensure that pieces are less likely to get lost, but it also makes cleanup a lot easier because your child just puts the tray back together the way they found it, and then they carry the tray back to its place on the shelf and return it. This as opposed to just chucking everything into a toy box where some of the small
small pieces might get lost in the crevices, never to be seen again. And of course, in a Montessori environment, there is always an emphasis on an appreciation of nature and connectedness with nature. So whenever possible, using natural materials for the baskets and trays, like woven materials and wooden trays, that is preferred, but again, certainly not a hard and fast rule. So my next tip is, whenever possible, especially for activities that have lots of pieces, present the activity on the shelf in an undone fashion. So for example, if your child has a puzzle, you would not place the puzzle already completed on the shelf because it's already done. Why would your child want to take all the pieces out just to put them back in again? Instead, if you present the puzzle to your child on the shelf with all of the pieces taken out in a basket, either in the same tray with the puzzle or maybe just on top of the puzzle if it's larger, then your child goes over to it and the pieces are not in there yet. So it's a lot more inviting for your child to want to pull it out and sit down and assemble it. So sometimes there are activities that don't need to be undone. For example, like these familiar faces cards, just presenting them as is totally fine. And in my case right now with the Grimm's Rainbow Stacker, Mia is having more fun with pulling it apart as opposed to putting it together. So I have it presented like this because that's what she wants to do, is pull it apart. But once she learns how to start stacking it correctly, I will likely take those pieces and put them unassembled in a tray like that one and put that on the shelf for her to learn how to put together. So what you really need to do is think about how your child is engaging with the material and then present it in the way that makes it most attractive to go to the shelf and actually take out. The next tip is to make sure that you rotate your child's toys and activities on the shelves as necessary. So at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that you should only have out roughly 8 to 10 activities at any given time, and I said to store away the rest of them. That storage space can be anything, whatever works for your family, be it a series of trays or baskets or bins somewhere in a closet or underneath a bed or in a basement area or an attic, whatever works for your family. And then when you do need to rotate some of the items out, you go into that storage area, pull out whatever it is that you feel your child would be most engaged with to replace, and then store away the items that you have just taken off the shelf. When it comes to rotating toys and activities, if you are trying to keep this as Montessori as possible, you should always follow your child. So that means that your decision to rotate any items should be ultimately based on your observations of your child's current interests and needs. Some people will say that you need to rotate your toys every week, or you need to rotate them every 2 weeks or every month. And truly, there is no set schedule for this because every child is different. What you can do on a regular basis is observe your child. Maybe sit down once a week or bi-weekly and make a point of it to just sit back and watch your child independently engage with some of the things that they have available on their shelves. And you can make some mental notes for yourself, or even physical notes if you want to sit there with a notebook, but do make some notes and observations for yourself as to what activities are not being touched by your child. And then you know those are the activities that are not calling to your child for some reason or another right now. It could be that it's too challenging. It could be that it's too easy. It could be that it's just been out too long and they're a little bit bored with it. But whatever the reason may be, that is your cue to remove that item from the shelf and find something else to replace it. You also want to make sure that all of the materials that are out for your child are complete and functional. So if you have a toy or activity that is broken, or if it's missing a couple of pieces, or if it's in a state of disrepair and it just needs to be fixed, those are the types of items that you also want to remove from the shelf and either fix it if possible or discard it if necessary. You don't want your child engaging with something that they aren't going to be able to complete, or that they could potentially injure themselves on because it's broken. That's just not ideal at all in any environment, not just a Montessori environment. So if you find things that are like that on your child's shelves, then definitely remove those as part of your regular rotation. You do not want to remove any items that your child is still actively using, even if to your eyes it appears that they have mastered it already. A personal example that I can share with you briefly is my daughter Kylie, who is 3. She used to play with the Melissa and Doug rainbow stacking rings with the little red ball on the top all the time when she was much younger, and then she mastered it and her interest in it waned, so I removed it from the shelf and I stored it away. I kept it around because I knew that we were going to reintroduce it at some point for our baby, who is now 13 months old. And I did finally bring it back out of storage, I think last month. So it's been out on our shelves for about 1 month now. And the moment that I reintroduced it, my 3-year-old was instantly drawn to it because she remembered the activity. But at this point, her fine motor skills are so good that she was instantly able to master it. And ever since then, she has been pulling out this set of stacking rings every single day and interacting and engaging with it multiple times a day. And even though it's something that I would consider a baby toy and something that she obviously does not need right now in her development because she's already mastered it, for some reason or another, this activity is calling to her. And it could be that she just feels that need for repetition, or she enjoys the sense of confidence in her mastery of that activity. But whatever the reason is, I'm not going to stop her from engaging with it. And even if my 13-month-old doesn't care for it, because Kylie looks like she is very much engaged with it right now, I'm going to leave it on the shelf. So with that said, it is totally fine if there are activities that you end up leaving out on your shelves for months or even years at a time. As long as your child is engaged with it actively, there's no reason to rotate it out. If you are looking for more tips on shelf rotation and storage of items that are out of rotation, I do have 2 other videos that you might want to check out. I will link them in the description box down below. One is Montessori at Home Shelf Rotation, and the other is called Montessori at Home Toy Storage and Organization. My next tip is related to considerations for a multi-age setting at home. So if you do have more than one child that are very different in age, for example, I have a 3-year-old and a 13-month-old, and some of you out there may even have larger gaps in age. If you have a situation like that, you are going to need to think ahead of time when you are putting things out on the shelves about what you need to do to safeguard the younger child while still making things accessible for your older child. So some ideas for you there are any activities that have lots of small pieces that could present choking hazards for the younger child. You would want to find some sort of a container that is able to fit all the pieces that the older child can open independently without your help, but that the younger child cannot yet open on their own.
So as I mentioned earlier, I did place the sandpaper letters way up there where my 13-month-old cannot get to them because I do not want her chewing on them. Most of the pieces that are out right here are totally safe for my 13-month-old, except for the knobbed cylinders. It has a lot of very, very small pieces. So that's why I have all the pieces stored in this little snap lid container that my 3-year-old can get open by herself with no problem, but my 13-month-old has not yet figured out how to do that. So that's a safe place where I can store the pieces and know that she's not gonna get them in her mouth, but my 3-year-old can also open it and engage with this activity whenever she wants.
You may also want to consider storing some of the more advanced activities just out of reach of the younger child, at least temporarily, up on some of the higher shelves that you do have available. And anything that is meant for the younger child, or it's okay for the younger child to get into it, then you can store those things down at the ground level, or at least on some lower shelves. You just always want to keep in mind that wherever the activities are being displayed, they're at eye level, appropriate for the child that it's intended for. And my last tip for you is what to do with books. So if you are able to display your child's books on a front-facing bookcase, and that means one where the covers are facing out instead of stacking them all where all that can be seen is the spine of the book, this would be ideal, because then your child is able to see the covers of all of the books and they can easily identify their favorites, they can remove them from the bookshelves pretty easily, and they can also put them away very easily.
I've put a lot of the books that are for my 3-year-old up above where she's more likely to see them because they're at her eye level and she can access them very easily. Whereas down here, I've put all of the baby books, things that are board books, nice and chunky, easy for my 13-month-old to pull down by herself because she is not walking yet. And again, they are at her eye level when she is crawling around. So it's a little bit more inviting for her to come over and pull off whatever title strikes her interest in that moment.
In lieu of a front-facing bookshelf, you can also wall mount at the child's level several shelves that are intended for pictures or even spices. I've seen spice racks used for this, but you can put books inside there front-facing so that they don't fall off the wall. And again, if they're at the child's level, then they can go over and independently access the books all by themselves. Another idea for for you is to use a low windowsill or some type of a ledge that's low down that is at your child's height, and just stand the books up front facing, and that's another way that you can give your child access to their own books. And even if you have none of these options available, there is still something you can do, and that is to create a book basket. So all you need to do for this is find a fairly wide basket that can fit some of the bigger picture books in it, and choose a small selection of perhaps 5 to 6, maybe 7 different titles that your child is actively engaged with right now, and place them in the basket front facing so that your child can easily flip through the books one at a time and see the covers and pick out the ones that they want, and again, put them away all by themselves. You can then take this basket and either place it next to your child's shelf where their activities are, maybe on the floor, but you can also include it right on the shelf itself or in one of the cubbies alongside all of your child's other activities. So those are my tips for how to set up your child's Montessori shelves. If you have any tips of your own to add to this list, then please be sure to share them with us in the comments down below. If you liked today's video, then please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. And just in case you are new to my channel, I did want to let you know that this video is part of a much larger series called Montessori at Home, which is aimed at providing practical tips and advice for busy parents like you and I for implementing Montessori philosophies at home with your children. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in learning more about, then you might consider subscribing to my channel. This way you don't miss a new video, because I do upload a new one just like this one every single week. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you next time. Bye!